Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Rebelville. I'm so glad to be back. I haven't been able to record in probably about 4 days. I had a few recorded that I was putting out, but I've been so busy with work lately, I just haven't had time to do my hobbies at night, this being one of them. And the time that I did have to do my hobbies, I didn't do this one. So here we are once again. Big announcement today. Some of you may like this, some of you may not, but it's going to happen nonetheless. This is going to be the last episode of this city. And I've gotten to the point with this city where every time I play the game, I'm reminded of the things that I really don't like about the city and that I really want to do better the next time around. And so I've decided, instead of, working through this one and we've kind of done, the things that you can do in a city here, I'm going to start a new one. And it's going to be a very planned out city, one that I think about the design and layout right from the beginning of constructing it, so that we can really have a really nice looking city. I want to do it on an interesting map that has terrain differences and water and all, you name it. There's so many cool things out there now compared to when the game came out. And so what I thought we would do for this last episode is go through the parts of the city and sort of see what we did and what we can learn from each of those. This was our starting area, obviously, right up here, our first highway connection. And one of the first areas that we put in was Candleshoes Heights. And I actually really like this area in the sense that the density is very low and it has a bit of sense to it, right? It's got low density in this area and it has the higher density more towards the freeway. It's a fairly nice looking area. Like, it's got pedestrian paths that you can see people are happily taking to get from this side to here. It's got nice parks, a little interesting pedestrian overpass across the avenue. I like the layout. I like the sort of parallel crescents in this area here. It's got this really neat little central park in it. We can get a good angle. The school's on fire. Is that a school? Yeah, elementary school. It's got this neat little park connecting kind of the two areas here. This being the Renato Villa, which was our secondary residential area, I believe, and it continued the crescent from this area all the way down. This was one of my favorite areas as well. Not for the majority of the playthrough, but the way that it ended up, I did like it. Once we put on more landing, I think the area really came into its own. We had this very dense residential buildings down here, and then on the outskirts of town by the river, this quieter, lower density area here. And I do really like the way that the street borders along the river. Looks fantastic. The one area that I was never truly happy with was this downtown core, and it felt to me like it was always kind of isolated from the rest of the city. It didn't seem to flow in to the city as well as I wanted it to. It has this really goofy, I don't know what you would call this, but we're certainly not going to do this again in the next one. I'm going to be replacing the initial one with a on-ramp, off-ramp system that makes some sense. This one doesn't. And I was never truly happy with the way that this worked out. It's better now than it was before. Obviously, we had that key shape here, and I really didn't like it when it was like that. So we did fix it a little bit, but again, this area seems really isolated from the rest of the city, and it probably has a lot to do with putting the big park here without truly surrounding the park with a business district, as you would see in Central Park in New York, where it's just surrounded completely by buildings. We had some gaps in here that we never really did fill in, and it wasn't for not wanting to, but it just didn't seem like anything fit quite in that area. That can be a result of a couple things, and I think the one in this city was that we didn't follow a grid pattern right off the bat, and I don't intend to do that very much in the next one, but I've noticed in looking at pictures of old cities, and certain of the viewers have commented that old cities, especially kind of the pre-1950s, are gridded, especially in the downtown areas, older residential areas. I've done that to some extent in the newer developments, like this one here was modeled after a 1950s-ish neighborhood in my hometown, and you can see that there is a fair amount of gridding. And I think that's exactly what's happened up here, is because we went right into the modern style crescent and non-uniform layout, we didn't quite sew it in very nicely into the on-ramp, off-ramp that was initially in our city. Now, that was a bit of a negative. One of the positive ones that I liked was the design of this mall, and I think this is a really, really realistic looking area. We've got a fairly big shopping mall here and here. We've got some parking. This isn't even close to the amount of parking that a mall of this size would have. I've been looking at some aerial pictures of malls lately, and they are huge parking lots compared to the building itself. So the next time we do a mall, I'm going to try to mimic the amount of parking that you would typically find around a mall. But this nonetheless was one of my favorite areas, and even this part of it as well, because we've got all these kind of low non-high-rise office buildings in this area. It just looks like it flows really well, and that has to do a lot with the gridding in here, but just a lot of the environment around it looks right. You know, having a mall and some office buildings, this just looks good. We've got this, which was one of the unique buildings, the Grand Mall, with some parking lots, but again, not nearly enough for a building of this size. But nonetheless, one of my favorite areas of the city, one of my favorite projects was building this mall, just because it was the first time that I had really taken a look at reference pictures and paid attention to detail in the city. This area here was a little bit of a tack on because we needed residential area in a bit of a hurry. Jackson View is the name of it. And again, we went back a couple times into Jackson View to do some renovations, and this was one of them that I actually really liked. It was a high school right here, and this was another try to get to realism effort of mine in the playthrough, putting this kind of park beside in the basketball court. But as far as realism goes, this doesn't even come close to it. Your high school is going to have like a student-teacher parking lot. They're going to have football field, soccer field, whatever, but this is too small for a high school. Maybe you'd see this in an inner city high school where the grounds are very limited, but in this sense, it should have been bigger. I don't really mind this area. There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't have anything that really stands out and says, you know, this is a unique looking area of the city. This area I did like, and when I look at it from the aerial view, it's one of my favorites to look at from the aerial view because it borders so closely on the lake that we have. And eventually I wanted to bring it all the way around and have it surround the lake. But, you know, in the next one we'll have lots of water as well. Aiken Cove was the name of this one. The unique thing that I did in this, and you might remember that episode where we designed these sort of grid pattern roads, is we put alleys in. And this was typical of old neighborhoods. They all have alleys. The old neighborhood that I live in has alleys. The one that my parents live in has alleys. You go to the newer areas, there isn't alleys. And so this was kind of a nice touch to make it look like it was a sort of an older area of the city. Moving over to this school, we worked on this not too long ago, a few episodes ago, where we decided to do some realism upgrades in the city. We did put a nice soccer pitch back here and did a bit of work with the pipe brush to make a concrete texture. It didn't fit quite well, so we took it out, but we did some pedestrian pathing in there. All in all, a pretty realistic looking elementary school. Not bad. I'm reasonably satisfied with the way that one came out. But, you know, all told, this area is pretty plain except for the addition of the alleys that we put in. This area here, we called this Picard Bridge, was actually named after an area of this city that I live in called Stonebridge. And Stonebridge is a new development, a new subdivision in the city that has the worst traffic you've ever seen in your life. There's one way in and one way out. And I did emulate that here to some extent. Even this wouldn't be allowed in Stonebridge. It's basically just one road, and that's all you have to choose from. and the traffic is horrendous. When we first put this area in without having all these other connections, guess what happened? The traffic was horrendous. And it's still, it's not bad. It flows really nicely now. There's still quite a bit of volume that goes through there, but it was really bad before we put in the metro connections. This area is a very cool residential area, although I wish I hadn't done any dense residential here, because there is very, very little dense residential in the actual Stonebridge area. And what it is it's not these big buildings, it's buildings like this size. So if you could, limit your game to produce this instead of these big 20-story monstrosities, that would be really cool. If you could, that's kind of why I was hoping that they would have had a medium residential in this, because this is kind of medium residential. This is not high density residential. In any event, I never minded Picard Bridge. I thought it was kind of a cool area. The street layout is modeled after the street layout in Stonebridge proper in my city, and I thought that was kind of a neat looking area. This area up here we used as our import-export transfer station, and I can do a way better job of this. I've been looking up how to do transfer stations and multi-track railroads, and this is just not going to cut it. And the next time we're going to be doing a transfer station, I can promise you it's going to be better than this one. Now, that takes us to, let's see, where should we go next? This experiment of an industrial area. I should have never connected this by road, and I did. And you can see what ended up happening is spaghetti roads. This ended up working out okay for me in the sense that the traffic flow doesn't jam, but it looks ugly, it looks unplanned. No city planner worth their salt would put roads in like this. When it was just a train connection, this actually worked pretty darn good. So I'm going to keep that in mind for the next playthrough, and maybe we'll have an industrial area that's accessible by traffic only. For realism, maybe we'll put a subway, or a metro rather, that goes to this area to deliver workers, although the game doesn't actually require that, which is kind of weird. But in any event, Robin Park, not a bad area. It did what it needed to do. It produced a lot of industry at the time that we needed industry, and it created a hell of a lot of traffic. Let's see, this was the last residential addition to this city, and I really like the way that this looks. And this was obviously modeled on, as I said before, an actual area of a city, aside from this border road. This area was interior, it wasn't by a river in the real city. But I love the road layout, and I love the fact that we had the alleys in here, which is very true to life to the city itself. It connects very well to the main highway. It has access to the underpasses under the highway. Really cool area. We did strive for better realism with our schools in this area, and I think we accomplished it. We've got a couple basketball courts, some pedestrian paths, soccer, high school. I think this looks pretty cool. You can tell by this point that I was already paying more attention to how a city is supposed to look when I made this area. And I think in the next city, we're going to be getting a lot more of this and better. The airport that I never named and I fully intended to do. This is one of my favorite builds in this city, and I think it looks very true to life, and that's what I like about it. And it's really the first time that I had to go digging for assets to make something look really correct in this game, I guess would be the best way to describe it. The stock airport is just so bad, and I don't know why they didn't give us some other puzzle pieces to play with. But you have to go get it yourself. I mean, look at what the stock airport is. Imagine none of this being here except for these two bits. It would be incredibly boring. This was also the first time that I heavily relied on reference images, in particular to the way that the taxi lanes on the runway are laid out. In the next city, we are definitely going to build a more advanced airport to this. I've had the practice doing this one, and the next one's just going to be better and better. Now, over to our most recent addition of the city, the town of Hendrick. Very interesting addition to the city, if I do say so. having sort of this outlier town is something that is accurate to true life and is an exercise in design in and of itself. So firstly, you know, you've probably heard of cities that eat up other little towns, and I know that my city has eaten a couple over the years. One by the name of Buena Vista, I believe, and another by the name of Sutherland. And so Hendrick eventually was intended to be gobbled up by the city of Rebelville. It never got to that point, but maybe in our next city we'll do something similar to this. I struggled a little bit with the design. As you can probably tell, you guys were going, yeah, that doesn't quite look like a small town. And if you were to say that criticism of it, I would have to actually agree with you, because I don't think I quite accomplished what I set out to do with the town of Hendrick. It looks a little dense, and the houses are just not quite right for a small town. We should have taken the time to do the small zoning and make the houses small as we went along. These large houses just don't really fit the motif. Now, the farms was an entire episode in and of itself, and one of you guys had commented, are these real farms? And no, they are definitely not real farms. They don't function as farms, they don't produce any money. And for whatever reason, the fence asset that I used to build this nice picket fence along the road attracted this massive seagulls. And I don't know, guys. What props do that? Is it like a beach asset or something that does that? I don't know, but the seagulls were annoying as hell. I think the farm turned out okay. I have some ideas for how to do this a little bit better in the next time that we try to do farms. But otherwise, all in all, a good first attempt at trying to do farms, I guess. Look, some people finally moved into these houses and I don't have power for them. That's okay, because you are going away the dinosaur. This freeway was, I believe, the last project we did in the previous video. You know, not much to say about it. I being fairly comfortable now with using the freeform tool with the roads, and that's how you get this nice serpentine curve, is using the freeform. And I like it. I mean, the freeway now goes right to the city, and you need that. I mean, every big city has a freeway that runs straight through it and services a lot of the busier areas of the city. So, I mean, not much to say about that. It's a freeway, did what it needed to do. Yucca Green. This is kind of a neat area, I would say. Aside from the on-ramp turnabout here that we never did modify, which we should have when we built this area. It's a pretty picturesque area. There's not much to say about it other than it's a low density area. It's got one main avenue. The traffic flows in this area are fantastic, as you can see. The side streets barely have any traffic on them whatsoever. It's all fed by this main road. This was one of the better traffic areas in the city, I would have to say. This area here, well, what to say about Decker Vista? I mean, not much. It houses a hospital. It's got some low density and some high density residential areas, and it borders along offices. As far as interest is concerned, there's not a whole lot going on in Decker Vista. Well, guys, that is an overview of the city, and I hope that you guys will tune in for the next city, because I think it's going to be a lot more fun. And I'm going to be paying attention to designing a very real-looking city right from the get-go. And I don't even care if we make money on it. What I mean by that is, are we going to play with cash or are we going to play with unlimited cash? As you can see, since like episode number 3, money hasn't been an issue whatsoever. So I'm contemplating even just starting off with unlimited money, because it really is meaningless at this point in the game. And you know, $9 million that I never spent. But anyway, guys. Okay, well, stay tuned, guys, for the next brand new city. I should have the new episodes coming out within a day or two here. And I'm hoping that you'll enjoy it as much as I will, because I know I'm looking forward to the fresh start. Until next time, guys, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.